Okay, everybody. So now this call is being recorded. Thanks everybody for joining. We usually have a little bit larger attendance, but since this is somewhat beginning of the year and folks are probably still on vacations, we'll share this call with them via recording on social media. My name is Ilya. I am chair of the software group within the Forbes Business Council. I personally run these calls and host these calls once every about 6 to 7 weeks. You all are more than welcome to join the other calls that are coming up. One is coming up in March and then so on. Personally, I run a software development company called Cider, based out of San Francisco, California. We specialize in supporting small to medium-sized organizations with their technology needs. This is from web development to mobile app development and custom software integrations from Salesforce.com to custom development on Jira, Atlassian suite of products. And I deal with a lot of startup entrepreneurs. I hear a lot of ideas. Some are great, some are getting there. And in general, I'm here as a resource, not only from the Forbes perspective, but also from my company perspective. First I want to thank very much Tom for joining this roundtable. Tom is an industry expert around Agile. Tom and I go back a few months. We were both in a networking organization where we met. And Tom comes with years of experience in Agile and Scrum. And he and I thought that it would be a great idea for him to join this call, speak about Agile, how it's used in the various industries, more specifically, of course, in technology, since most of you, I assume, are in the technology field. He will present for about 15 to 20 minutes. And then the idea of this roundtable is for it to be just that, to have a discussion, to have idea sharing. And let's kind of move forward that way. Tom, welcome to the call. I think you're going to be presenting some stuff. Also, please feel free to a few words about your organization and how you can also be an asset to folks on this call.
Great, thank you, Ilya. Yes, I'm with a company called RisingTerrain. We focus on helping teams be more productive. So, that is oftentimes using Agile practices, also in that a lot of practices that are called Lean. And my start in that was actually in the building, design, and construction industry, where for a lot of the terminology used there is Lean, but it's really this fusion between technologies that are and approaches that are Agile based with some traditional Lean. But in architecture and construction, the word Lean was an afterthought to the actual beginning of the development. But you'll see things happening like typically weekly sprints for design teams and for construction teams both. The weekly development of the work plan with the team, the weekly retrospective and assessment of how the work is going, the daily huddles and check-ins. It's in this design and construction industry that we're applying Agile, and then technology comes into play because we're increasingly using a lot of technology in terms of modeling the buildings, but also the management of the workflow too. We're using tools that help us coordinate and collaborate better. I'm going to just share some slides and give a brief run through of how we approach it. And really the focus today is as much as anything about the importance of having social connection as a foundation for success. When you're using Agile methodologies, if you Lean methodologies or some type of fusion between the two. So you'll see I sometimes bounce between the terms Agile and Lean because it's all about creating quick feedback loops, creating a more collaborative environment that's really focused on the people and the customer and the product. So Yeah, a little bit about me too. Just for Catan, I show you that I've been to Chicago. This is my wife and daughter with me. My daughter is a big Broadway show fan, so we go to shows in Chicago. I have family there, so it's nice to go there, and New York, and where we live in Boston. So it's sort of, I was never a Broadway fan before, but it's sort of fun to see it through a teenager's perspective. And you know, she's looking at that as a very sincere possible career interest on the technical side. She's interested in stage design, set design, sound, lighting, and it's just a lot of fun. So that's a little bit more about me. And it's one of the reasons I like to show that is, you know, we're not just our titles, our position, our companies. We're also, you know, our friends, our family. That's important to see that too. We have a lot of data in my industry, and they're using the term lean, but you could say that it's a lot of lean and agile type of approaches. And we see that it does make a difference, right? The metrics are there. This is data from 162 projects built by serial owners. So these are owners like, the names you'd recognize. Some of them I shouldn't necessarily mention, but like say Cleveland Clinic, some of the major builders are firms like Procter and Gamble, for example. But they build a lot of repeat projects. And so when they use these lean practices, some of them, including a lot of them, are about the weekly planning, the daily check-ins and so forth. They are, you know, 3 times likely to come in ahead of schedule than a typical project, and then twice as likely to complete under budget. And my own experience is that teams that adapt these approaches are generally seeing 20% increases in productivity on the labor side. When we use it in the design phase on projects, we're oftentimes getting projects to 20 to 25% below a benchmark of similar projects without sacrificing either program or aesthetics. So it's remarkable what a group of people can do when they're using certain practices. I just threw this in here. These practices are used around the world. You know, the national culture is not important. This happens to be just a slide from a team in Brazil I worked with last year, actually 2 years ago now. Pre-pandemic. So we've used these practices on hospitals, residential buildings, hotels, airports, copper mines, fertilizer plants. So across the board, it doesn't matter what type of project, what type of national culture we're working in, these techniques are really effective. With that, you'd think in terms of companies that are using these practices, it might be widespread. The metrics are there to support that financially. This makes a lot of sense, and yet they don't. And so my most common question from people that I work with is, how do I get the people on my project to buy into lean? And if we were talking about Agile, it'd be just that. How do we get people to buy into this, changing how they do work? And it's not really about convincing them solely that it's a more cost-effective way to do work, because for a lot of people, that's not the only motivator. And so we have to look at how do we create a project team culture that wants to buy into lean. And what really, one of my sort of turning points in understanding this, because I'm one of these guys who says, you know, these agile processes make a lot of sense. I understand them. I get them. I see how they create more productivity. Same with the lean practices. And if I can take those elements of both that make sense for my design project or my construction project, I'm going to use them. It makes a lot of sense. A lot of people aren't like that. They have other things that attract them and get them excited about work. And it occurred to me that a lot of the way we describe whether it's lean or agile is from the standpoint of someone that's more technically oriented, you know, in that sort of conventional sense, that left brain type of person. And so I wanted to see what a different kind of person might think about. And we use specifically lean because I were a number of lean experts actually here and in Europe, we could get to participate with us. And we gathered a bunch of artists and we exposed them to lean for the better part of a week. And at the end of the week, asked them what they thought of all this. And it was fascinating because if you ask most people practicing lean, they'll say it's founded on science. It's a scientific approach to work. And what these artists said is like, well, after seeing all this and understanding the history and where it came from, we really see that it's informed by arts and crafts and spirituality of all things, which really floored me at the time. But it also gave me insight into how I might start to appeal to other people in terms of trying to get them to absorb other practices. So I wanted to look lean specifically, at the history of it. And this is what we think about when we see lean, right? It's, I don't know to what degree you may be familiar with that, but it comes largely from an examination by some engineers, industrial engineers at MIT, what happened at Toyota that allowed them to increase productivity at such a high rate between 1950 and the 1980s. And they go back to the work of this person, Teiichi Ono, and he was really focused on reducing waste and really improving the operations in the Toyota factories. And this is a quote by him, and this is what people think. We're going to standardize work, make it more efficient, cut out the waste. This is my actually favorite quote from him. It's he was big on distinguishing between work and motion, right? So just because you're moving, that's not work. Work is actually creating value. And so that's what a lot of people think about lean. It's about creating value. But what we learned when we looked at why people embrace it at Toyota and other places is it's more about giving them a way to be more effective at contributing to some common purpose. There's some kind of vision that they all share. This was the initial statement of purpose for the Toyota Motor Company. It was about, at that time in 1935, improving the welfare. The statement says country. It's arguably clear, that it was really about the certain people in a part of Japan where that had suffered under the Shogun Empire for centuries, the agrarian economy. And that's where Sakichi Toyota came from. He's unique among the Japanese industrialists in the early 19th century, the late 19th century, the early 20th century. He's unique in the sense that he comes from this agrarian background, not from the samurai, not from the shogun traditions. And he has this sense that what a business is about and what an organization about is contributing to the welfare of some group of people. And this makes a lot of sense, that if you bring a group of people together and think about how their culture will work towards some kind of purpose and engage them in a way that they find valuable and meaningful to them, and put that conversation ahead of these agile practices are really going to make you more efficient. These lean practices are going to help you cut out waste, but really focus on engaging them in some kind of purpose for their work. You're going to get better results, and you're going to get people wanting to embrace then more productive ways of working. This is a study from Gallup. Gallup surveys tens of thousands of people on what they call an engagement survey. They have 12 questions, so I put 4 of them up there. But you can see they're all about relationships, personal relationships. That 10th question there, Q10, I have a best friend at work. Some people that would seem odd question to ask. Why do you have friends at work? But what they find is that when people are engaged at a personal level with work, productivity goes up, profitability goes up, safety accidents go down, a feeling of well-being goes up. All of this is what's important in creating an engaged culture. And so so I just have a few slides to help us think about how we want to discuss about the roles of culture in terms of creating an environment where people want to embrace agile practices. These are some of the things that get in the way, that we see get in the way. Rigid rules. This is the way things have to be. Basically limited areas of concern for each person. If an organization has this and they're trying to adapt an agile mindset, the two are working against each other. And we really feel that projects, companies, teams that work together need to really create this environment where they develop a sense of shared leadership. And what I mean by that is that if you're in a team or you have an organization, you might have a titled leader, but they should feel comfortable as a title leader to still say and admit, I don't know the answer to that question. There's a lot of pressure on senior leaders in organizations to say, I know how everything should be done. You can come to me for the answers. And the reality is, it doesn't matter how intelligent you are, it's hard to have all the answers. And yet there's this, for a lot of people, this pressure to be always right, to have the answers. So you have to have this sense that you're willing to share leadership, that someone who's junior on the team might have the answers, and they need to have the freedom to feel like they should be part of they have that leadership responsibility in questioning, raising issues, not being afraid to do that. The idea is everybody on a team should share in leading how that team is going to perform. And we want to create that kind of mindset. Something that gets in the way is that a lot of organizations, their incentives are set up, or the way they're structured, pits personal ambitions against what the company wants to accomplish. And you want to try to really find a way to align all of that. And we do a lot of work with teams, just trying to get them aligned on what their purpose is and sharing in the rewards of achieving that purpose. And so we spend time just helping them understand what it is they're changing in the world, who they're impacting, why that makes a difference to other people, and then why that is personally important to them, and get that alignment in place. We see, and this is really antithetical to Agile, but you see many organizations limit where information is distributed, and they limit how and through what people information needs to be distributed. You really want to create an environment that's completely transparent. There's an interesting, and some people would say extreme example of that in the financial industry. That largest hedge fund on the bottom, Bridgewater Associates, other than meetings that address very sensitive personnel issues, every meeting in that organization is recorded. Whether you're invited to that meeting or not, you have the ability to listen to the recording, understand what's happening. The idea is it's an extreme form of transparency. But if you're working together with the team, you don't want to have areas where you're locking in information. You want to be able to have people have access and pull the information that they need to do their job and do their work, and feel also that they're part of the team's mission. And the other thing too that we see gets in the way of an effective agile or lean workplace is that we all have these strategies that we may not even know, that sort of we hide some of the things that we're able to give to a project. And it's oftentimes for good reason, a defensive strategy. We've put ourselves out, even in childhood in some way, and we were either ridiculed or told we weren't supposed to behave that way. And we learn subconsciously to avoid expressing certain parts of ourselves that are actually strengths, and we don't bring those to our teams. So it's important to have some time to actually reflect on who you are and what you want to contribute, and develop some courage around being able to speak up when you're working with teams. And there are ways of doing that. We look for ways to help our clients understand who they are personally, why they want to make some impact on the world, and then how they can link that or connect that to the purpose of the organization or the team that they're working with. But it's more than, I'm Tom Richert. I'm a consultant and a coach, and I help people get, become more productive by developing their teams. But I'm also a person that, enjoys and brings together a way of reducing tensions when working with people, meeting people where they are. Those aren't necessarily part of my job descriptions, but they're qualities that I bring. And we all have qualities that aren't part of our job descriptions that are strengths that we want to bring to the relationships we have with other people. In summary, I really was looking for a discussion on, the idea that we have with Agile, Lean, any of these practices. We have some great tools and ways to be more productive, and yet to get people to buy in or accept or want to embrace them, we can't argue the science or the behind them. We have to create an ambition to be performing at a high level. And that's more about creating this social culture that's focused on some kind of purpose, and a culture that's transparent with each other, willing to share in the leadership responsibilities in terms of getting work done, and contribute together. So, those are some questions that I'm throwing out there as possible discussion points, but I'm happy to, I think wherever people want to take this conversation, I'd enjoy being part of it.
Thanks, Tom. This was great. I really enjoyed the historical aspect of it, and looking at the Japanese culture and how it was done at Toyota. At my organization, we definitely employ Agile, Scrum. I like to call it, religiously use it in every aspect of a day, a week, and a month. So we split our client projects into sprints, just like what you described. Those sprints, we're fairly flexible in the length of the sprints, but it really depends on the size of the project. So if the project is 1 to 2 months in length, we usually like to cut the sprints down into weekly increments. If they're lengthy projects that are months at a time, 6+ months, they're usually in bi-weekly sprints. We always grant our clients access to not only the development team, project management team, but also to the Scrum boards. So we personally utilize Jira. We've utilized before Trello. Some folks may know what those are, others may not. But those are highly effective collaborative tools, collaboration tools that allow both the client and the development team to have access to one another and avoid running into pitfalls in losing information or losing information in translation. So we usually like to avoid working in email. Instead, we like to open so-called tickets or tasks within Jira, and that allows for tracking for both development as well as on the client side on what each side is doing. So that's kind of my feedback. So Scrum is highly effective, at least for my organization, and without it, I think we wouldn't be where we are today, and we'd instead be having a ton of unhappy clients, and communication would be a train wreck, I think, from our side. Anybody else have any feedback? Tom, maybe you can bring up that last slide.
Yeah.
Question.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just set there. I mean, I've done 8 startups. I've sold 6 already. So 7 the last 8 have used Jira. 4 the last 8 have used Slack. There was no Slack before that. But if you really look back at it, and thanks a lot, Tom, what's interesting, if you look at the history of Lean, and again, we use over 50 different operational theories, right? Lean and just in time really come from Toyota Production Systems. Toyota Production Systems, actually, the Toyota family was introduced to that through the Honda Couture family right after the war, when Toyota was still a spindle manufacturer in the agricultural sector, and Honda Couture actually brought them. Deming had been the professor from Chicago, had actually been out in Japan and teaching there and teaching some American methodologies. And the Honda Couture family provided the seed money for the Toyota family and the knowledge to start that from Deming. Of course, Deming in the US had borrowed a lot of theories in the previous century that came from Europe and Hungary and what was then Prussia. So it's actually, and if you look at what came out of that, you have the theory of constraints, you have Eli Goldratt with the goal, you have Eli Schregenheim, you have Henry Camp. So the whole theory of constraints, you have Kaizen, you have Six Sigma, you have Yoka Poka, Yokotan, and, continuous improvement in dozens of other methodologies. It's interesting that in software, it's kind of really got laser focused down to the sprints and scrums and what you can do. But we've found that when you blow things back up and apply some of these larger methodologies to your entire operations, you actually get, the name of our company obviously, but you get much better throughput throughout the entire organization, and not just from the technology group that's constantly going through various iterations and MVPs of the codes to come up with better. We do that too, because it's best practices and folks are used to it, but we also try to apply that to ourselves and to a lot of organizations we work with. We actually work with about 62 or 63 lean consultants and TOC, theory of constraint consultants around the world, helping them to apply our software to their methodologies. Because as Tom said, you can't just slap on a Band-Aid or slap on software. It's a complete change in mindset when you're working with large corporations. You've got to get them to think differently and to change their culture. And if you don't get buy-in at the top, and get those folks as sponsors, champions, and change agents, you're never going to get buy-in at the bottom, and you're never going to get the change of incentives, which ultimately changes behavior. And, as Eli Goldratt once said, tell me how you're going to measure me and I'll tell you how I'll behave. So that's my quick 2 cents.
Yeah, it's interesting because you went through and talked about all the different practices that are out there. And when we exposed a group of artists to that with, I don't know if the names may not mean anything. John Shook was the first American manager at Toyota in Japan. Nicholas Modig with Per Alstom. Nicholas wrote this great book, and he participated in this workshop with the artist. Dave Verbal was with North America Toyota, in charge of HR for 14 years. We have people like that, helping the artist understand what all of this stuff was about. And we took them tour factory in Lexington, Kentucky, and they came away, and you wouldn't think from what Seth said that this would be a comment, but they said, this all looks like good stuff, but you don't have a language to talk about it. And it just blew me away because we have so many words and terminologies. But I think when you talk to a lot of people, I don't think artists are that unique. I think when you talk to some of the executives and things at different organizations, they might be hearing this, but they're not hearing a language. It's interesting.
Yeah, and it has to be put in a language they understand. And when you're primarily measured on EPS and earnings per share, and your entire comp package is measured on a quarterly basis, right? Whether it's stock options and or cash bonuses, a lot of that has to get tied up into a cost accounting financial view of the world, which means you have to take various lean TOC optimization type of concepts and put it in a way that translates to, this is how you make more money, or this is how you get a better business result, or this is how you get a better outcome, or this is how much money you left on the table last year because you did things, you never want to say the wrong way, but because you did things this way, and you can change your behavior in the future to get better outcomes and become more competitive, because that's what they're incentivized on, right? Whereas the operations folks have a different set of KPIs that they're being held to, typically around OEE and MTTR and MTTA and uptime and whatever else they're being measured on, inventory, stock up, stock outs, as we've seen in COVID, right, with the supply chain.
Seth, what does your organization do?
Yeah, we're very simple. So this is out of my 8th company. This is my 4th that's been in industrial AI. So we focus specifically on using the decades of existing data systems, silos throughout companies, and applying our AI software to that, which includes kind of 50 plus different best practices and methodologies that Tom was talking about, and then providing better business outcomes, right? So using your data and your domain experts and our software to get better output, quicker inventory turns, less waste, ultimately a higher EPS, and make you more competitive in the market, and also really free up cash flow and working capital, so you have more money to reinvest into company people, CapEx, investors, distribution, community, whatever it is that you care about. But primarily a software play But to do that, we end up partnering with a lot of folks. I'd probably say in the world where Tom operates, because we can give you, from data that no one's ever connected before, very quickly, we can give you great insights and fantastic recommendations. But if someone doesn't actually take those recommendations and put them into action, which is typically what lean type of companies will do, or TOC companies will do, then you don't get results. And a lot of that has to do with changing people's thinking at the top, which again isn't our play. We're the software play. We're not the services play. And translating that down to incentives and actions at the shop floor all the way to the top floor. You don't change the incentives, you're not going to change the behavior. And the only way to change the incentives is to make people think differently about how they want to get better outcomes, right?
So
but there's a reason
Seth,
we do software sprints, right?
Yeah. So Seth, you're like an aggregator, and you push out dashboards for the decision
We have
makers?
a single system, end-to-end single system of truth that ties together 27 different type of legacy data systems. So from, you think of ERP, right? SAP, Oracle, Progress, Infor, to MES systems, if you're a manufacturing system, SCADA system, utility, oil and gas, warehouse management systems, inventory management system, transportation management systems, your S&OP systems, financial accounting systems, your CRM and your POS systems. If you have industrial IoT systems, that's fine too. So anything that kicks off time-stamped data, which is, for all of us, it's any piece of data that's ever been stored on any media since we got rid of punch cards, it's a time-stamped data series. We take that data, we use a lot of intellectual property to merge that together, turn it into different signals that allow us to then process it with a lot of AI, and then make recommendations on how to get more efficient end-to-end supply chains and operations, which ultimately provide better business outcomes, right? So yeah, effectively from a lean point of view, you are leaning out the waste in operations and supply chains and freeing up working capital to reinvest in the company. But it's all a software tool, right? And then we typically partner with service providers to do on the ground work, because that's what they're great at.
George, what does your organization do? You're on mute, George.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a little software firm, and basically what we do, we're OEM for blockchain. So using blockchain as a base, we build ERP platforms on top of that in order to make businesses more efficient. We don't have AI built in like what Seth has, but certainly what we do is that we make ERP applications a lot more efficient with the sort of characteristics that the blockchain can add. And in addition to that, we also do our own coin. So we've got a cryptocurrency on exchanges that we trade. And in the future, one of the things that we're looking at is we've got 3 central banks who we're in discussion with now to put digital currencies out on the market. So basically, that's going to be our focus going forward, having CBDCs and then supporting ERP platforms with the unique characteristics that blockchain lend to it.
Thanks, George. Anybody else? Anybody else have feedback? How are you utilizing lean in your organization? Maybe Ketan?
Yeah. So ROI Blueprints is actually a competitor of Jira and Trello. So it's a portfolio and project management tool. So we go into organizations that are typically large, like 500 million in revenue or larger, because it's a portfolio and project management tool. So we put in the processes, and our tool covers the intake, like project intake, all the way through time tracking, execution, financial ledger. So that's what we do. And of course, we use Agile to actually build the product. The interesting thing I've seen is a lot of the corporate IT departments, Agile is claimed to be used, but they're almost never agile, like almost never. Like you see sprints that are not really sprints, they just keep pushing dates, stuff never gets pushed out. And so I think, Tom, that the whole mindset and training them to think agile is probably the first thing that needs to go on before they pick any sort of tool or try and actually implement it.
Yeah, I would say, and what I've learned is that it is really developing an ambition among the team as the team to perform well. Because I can, certainly at a senior level, you can talk about profits, earnings, increasing margins, and so forth. If I'm talking with a project team that's designing a building, I'm talking to architects and engineers, financially, they may not have a business, personal incentive in performing really well. So we really are tapping into what they're contributing in terms of the impact. And we've had we call them sessions where we're developing. Well, the title of the session is called Courageous Leadership, and we help teams develop a unified vision of the purpose and the impact they're having on other people. And we've had sessions where people are emotionally connected to being able to deliver a project, say a hospital project that currently in design has an estimated cost of 480 million, which sounds, but they need to get 20 million out of it to get the full scope in to be able to help people. And that particular hospital is designed to help women and families with premature births, and to be able to get that full scope in was personally important to people on the team. They realized, that impact that they were making on the community in being able to get that design delivered for a budget. So you do, for a lot of the people that are going to be asked to adapt agile and lean practices, you've got to look for some other kinds of incentives that engage them emotionally. I think even at the top executive level, when you're talking profits and earnings, you're probably engaging them emotionally too, right? I mean, that gets them excited, right?
Right. You're right.
When I'm talking with an engineer, being able to deliver a project for 10% under the budget, so that owner, that's a hospital, can then take that money, invest it in a future project, while they're helping a community have better health care, that may motivate them emotionally. And so you've got to tap into that, because whether it's, the agile practices, the lean practices, there's a discipline involved, there's a rigor involved, and it's a daily focus that's necessary. So it's not easy. The results are wonderful, but the focus part is really important. And there's got to be something driving people emotionally if they're going to perform at a high level day in and day out, especially when they're working with people from other companies that they may work on together for a year or two and never see again, right? It's a whole brand new culture. How do you get them excited every single day so they're willing to use an agile practice or a lean practice? That's the challenge, and that's the fun part of what I get to do.
Well, it's interesting too, because I come from a family of architects. If you ever look at, a Toll Brothers or a KB building up a whole series of track houses, you've got kind of one culture going on. And if you go over to Habitat to Humanity and watch people building houses there, it's a completely different culture, and the mission's different, and the way people interact are different. And it's, and there's a larger purpose there, and you can really, if you've been there, you can feel it from the ground up. One people they're just getting cranked to get as many houses done as they can within a certain standard, and the other type is really doing something they believe in and actually involving the people who are going to get partial benefit from that. So it's there is a greater purpose, but underlying that, there's also financial incentives, and unfortunately, in capital society, you have to deal with too. So.
Yeah. Unfortunately, right? Most corporations, you live and die with the income statement, and it's tough to incentivize the folks who are actually getting the work done, Tom. That's the key part.
That's the key part. Yeah. So like on a integrated project, so there's a hospital. Well, there's a MOB with an emergency department, a building facility. The benchmark market cost, and this is for a hospital that build these all the time, so they knew what their benchmark was. It was 32 million. The team delivered it for under 25. Now, the companies that were involved there was a savings incentive. So all the builders, the engineers, architects, they all as organizations were able to earn extra fee because of the savings that was generated for the hospital. Individually, the reward was more, psychic or emotional, right? It was about, wow, we delivered. a project under, because that 32 million was actually above what the hospital could afford for that project. So we got that project into a range during design where the hospital could afford to build it. And we delivered healthcare to this community that didn't have it. So, individually, you need to sort of tap into that emotional side because, the companies have the financial incentives, and the companies can mandate working with Agile or working with Lean. But I think, Ketan, what you're noting is mandating is not enough. People won't necessarily.
It's not, and I might reach out to you separately, Tom, just to get some ideas on this because I mean we're agnostic. We're not. The tool is not bound to support one methodology or another, but we do find that most organizations really like, at least they want to go to Agile, whether it's Scrum or even some organizations, even in software, they want to implement Lean. So I'll sync up with you to just kind of get some ideas on change management.
Yeah, no, love to talk. I enjoy it.
Awesome.
Very good. Anybody else would like to provide some feedback?
Yeah.
Steve,
Hi.
doing a
Okay,
little-
this is Satish here from Purple Rain. So we are a B2B software company, primarily in B2B SaaS. So we run a multi-product company, 5 different products, multiple entities. So we've been remote first from 2009. Team size is about 100 plus. So we use Jira and Trello primarily for our software development projects. For marketing and sales, we use different tools. In fact, we use a total of 50 plus tools across the organization. HubSpot for sales and marketing, Asana for team operations. We use Product Plan for product backlog management and story planning. So typically, what happens is we run the entire story scoring on Product Plan. Product Plan is a tool which is basically used to collect feedback from the user. So this is not really a agency model. This is more of a product model, right? So we continue to collect feedback from the end users. Then that feedback goes to the product manager. Then they will have to score that, analyze that, and then put that into our product roadmap. So that's why we figured out Jira would have its own limitations. So we had to really work with different tools for different goals. So after implementing Product Plan, it has really helped us in streamlining at least our product roadmap. And also it allows our customers to see our roadmap transparently. And we also run sprint plans in our marketing. Once again, we tried using Jira for marketing sprints, which did not help because people the marketing folks are not really as tech savvy as engineers. So they want something much more user friendly. So we tried Monday.com, then we tried a couple of other tools, finally settled down with Asana. And right now Asana is our primary team operations tool. So anything that needs to be done goes into Asana. Anything related to engineering goes to Jira. And Trello is primarily used for content and basic backlog. Anything related to product planning goes in Product Plan. So even though there are multiple tools, it kind of helps us in staying focused with certain goals. On top of that, we also use tools like Time Doctor for remote team management. Like basically we have an issue with who's logging in, who's logging out, payroll and everything. So we use Time Doctor because the team is about 30 countries plus. Then we need to know who logs in at what time. And yeah, so it might not be relevant in terms of an software development perspective alone, but more on the organizational side. This is how we kind of structured everything. So we figured all of this out. I would say mostly through trial and error.
Great, thanks for the feedback. Folks, anybody else would like to add comments, ask Tom any questions? This is a great discussion. Jason, Iflok, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. You guys have been quiet. All right. I do like to put people on the spot a little bit. But in any case, yeah, as I said, from our side, Agile is key. The interesting thing about it, though, is it feels like there is no limit to how much of it you can learn. I myself have taken a course or two at Stanford on Agile specifically. So when I launched my company, I'm not an engineer by trade myself. I'm more of a financial and operations person. But having on staff experienced project manager that are Scrum certified and so on, I did find it necessary for me to, I guess I want to say, scratch the surface as it relates to Scrum and how it functions within the team environment. So the courses that I took were quite useful, and it got me a little bit closer to being effective when actually speaking with a client and interacting during the project with the development team, design, and project management as well. So for those that actually haven't done any sort of formal training on Scrum, I do recommend it. Some of the high-level training isn't long. It usually takes a few days, but it is highly effective. And I think if not that, at least reach out to Tom with questions. I'm sure he'll be able to. He'll be happy to interact and assist folks here.
Yeah, it would, and also have a pretty lengthy reading list on a number of things, going from Scrum to Lean to just sort of team behavior and things on neuroscience as well, because the science on how people work together is particularly in a social setting is fascinating, and it reaffirms some of the things that we were talking about here in terms of the importance of connecting people.
So Tom, aside from being an expert in Agile, I see a couple guitars behind you. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in guitar playing. So I was taking lessons a few years ago, and I succumbed to just a schedule and other priorities. And once in a while I pick it up and I'll play one of them. The one on the wall is actually pretty cool because I pre-pandemic, I traveled a lot. And that one actually is made of carbon fiber, so it's pretty durable. And the neck detaches without having to unstring it, so it folds into a special bag for it. And I wouldn't check it necessarily, but it makes for good carry-on luggage, and it's easy to haul around. So if I'm not going to play them, I'm at least going to show people that at one time I did, and maybe look a little cool.
That's awesome. Yes. So Tom and we actually have a connection in common, who actually just won a recognition of being the best guitar coach of the year or something like that. Tom, was that what it was?
It was, yeah, I think it was guitar coach of the year or teacher of the year. But yeah, Mike, won that award for 2020, and which is great. And he's got a fantastic, he gives lessons in person, but he developed this fantastic online virtual lesson practice.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, in any case, everybody, thank you so much for joining. This was, Tom, very informative. I very much enjoyed the discussion and some of the ideas that everybody shared. I will post this on LinkedIn. I'll tag folks there so you can actually see the recording. I'll also share Tom's contact details in a follow-up email. Tom, I don't know if you have another last slide with your details on it. If not, I'll have folks. I'll forward your information to the.
Yeah, and no, I didn't. I didn't put the email address on there. So
you're on LinkedIn now, right, Tom?
I'm on LinkedIn. Yep, under Tom Richert, you'll find me pretty easily.
Great. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. I'll give everybody 3 minutes back in their day.
All right. Wonderful meeting all of you. Enjoyed the discussion. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Likewise.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Ilya. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.